I've lived long enough to recognize the tremors that come before a global quake. I've seen oil shocks turn superpowers unsteady, currency wars erase fortunes overnight, and Cold War energy crises push nations into corners they swore they'd never occupy. So when the headlines flashed bright and loud about the latest BRICS summit, I knew something was off. The media was busy replaying the same surface-level sound bites, celebrating photo ops, repeating talking points that were polished long before the cameras rolled. But headlines rarely tell you where the real danger lies. While the world was distracted by the public agenda, the speeches, the staged agreements, the carefully choreographed handshake, I kept my eyes on the shadows behind the stage. Because what unfolded behind closed doors wasn't a routine diplomatic exchange. It was a quiet energy pact, subtle enough to slip past most analysts, yet powerful enough to rattle the foundation of the global order. If this pact holds, it won't just challenge the petrodollar. It will weaken U.S. leverage in markets, in negotiations, and on the geopolitical chessboard. Everyone saw the summit. Almost no one saw the deal that truly mattered. When you peel back the diplomatic gloss, the real breakthrough wasn't in the public communiques. It was in a document that never made it to the press kits. Behind closed doors, the BRICS bloc quietly finalized the framework for what insiders are calling an energy settlement system. Not a currency, not an alliance, a mechanism. Here's the simplest way to understand it. Instead of settling oil, gas, and LNG trades in dollars, participating nations will use a mixed currency basket, part yuan, part rupee, part ruble, anchored by a commodity-linked digital unit designed specifically for cross-border energy transactions. Think less new OPEC and more parallel SWIFT, built to route around the dollar-dependent pipes of the current system. This isn't theory. This isn't the usual de-dollarization noise that economists dismiss as posturing. This is the first functional alternative with enough trade volume behind it to matter. And the real shock, Russia's energy export infrastructure and Saudi Arabia's production leverage appear to be aligning inside the framework. One brings the supply corridors, the other brings the swing producer influence that can redefine price discovery itself. If this system gains traction, the petrodollar isn't just challenged, it's outflanked by a network designed to make it optional. The headlines missed it, the markets haven't priced it. But the shift has already begun. For half a century, the petrodollar has been the quiet engine of American power. Most people think the dollar's dominance comes from GDP size, military might, or Wall Street sophistication. But the real cornerstone has been far simpler. Oil is priced in dollars. That single fact forces every nation, from industrial giants to tiny import-dependent economies, to hold vast reserves of USD just to keep their lights on. And once nations hold dollars, they park them in U.S. treasuries. That creates relentless demand for American debt, and that demand allows Washington to run deficits no other nation on earth could survive. It's not about oil. It's about the dollar's throne. Now, imagine even a modest fracture in that system. You don't need the whole world abandoning the dollar. A 10–15% shift of global energy settlements into the BRICS mechanism is enough to break the math. That's billions, eventually trillions, of dollars that no longer need to sit in U.S. reserves or treasuries. Less demand for treasuries means higher yields. Higher yields mean higher interest rates. Higher rates mean every dollar the U.S. borrows becomes more expensive. And when federal borrowing costs rise, Washington loses the one tool it has used for decades to project soft power, cheap capital. The danger isn't loud, chaotic, or sudden. It's a slow leak in the hull of the American financial order, precisely the kind of threat most people don't notice until the ship starts tilting. If you think this deal stays confined to energy settlements, you're missing the real tremors already spreading beneath the markets. When the foundation of the dollar-centric system is questioned, even quietly, the first pressure points appear in bonds, currencies, and commodities. Rising U.S. bond yields. Everyone blames inflation or the Fed's messaging. Few are willing to admit that foreign buyers have been quietly stepping back, redirecting capital toward BRICS-aligned channels, dollar volatility. Analysts call it normal chop, ignoring the fact that major sovereign funds in the Middle East and Asia have begun rebalancing into gold, yuan assets, and commodity-backed instruments. History has shown how fast a single policy shift can reshape the global order. In 1973, an oil pricing decision sent shockwaves through markets for 2 decades. What BRICS just set in motion has the potential to be even larger because it targets the financial plumbing, not just the price of crude. Gold and oil are already flashing early warning signs. Emerging markets are positioning themselves for a world where they no longer need to pay a dollar premium just to keep energy flowing. Yet U.S. markets remain eerily calm, lulled into confidence by models that assume the old rules still apply. These aren't random ripples. These are the tremors before the earthquake. While Washington reassures itself that long-standing alliances will hold, its closest energy partners are quietly rewriting their playbooks. These aren't public declarations or dramatic pivots, they're hedges, structured quietly, executed methodically. Saudi Arabia has begun experimenting with long-term, non-dollar energy contracts, not loudly enough to alarm markets, but firmly enough to signal that the dollar monopoly is no longer sacred. The UAE is going a step further, building joint energy investment channels with China and Russia, structured to settle in mixed currency baskets and commodity-linked units. And India, habitually pragmatic, is negotiating discounted settlement pathways that allow it to bypass dollar volatility altogether. None of this is anti-America, it's anti-risk. Nations don't follow loyalty, they follow incentives. And right now, the incentives are telling them to hedge against U.S. fiscal instability, political gridlock, and foreign policy swings that have become harder to predict each year. What's most revealing isn't any single contract or partnership, it's the pattern. These countries aren't waiting for a crisis. They're positioning themselves before one materializes. They're creating optionality that weakens the dollar's gravitational pull, even if they never fully exit the U.S. orbit. When allies start building escape routes, it's not because they want to leave. It's because they're no longer certain the center will hold. For decades, America moved through the world with the confidence of a nation convinced its foundations were unshakable. But beneath the surface, the structure has been quietly eroding. Debt piled higher, deficits widened, political polarization deepened, and policy consistency evaporated. What used to be a stable system has become a machine that lurches from one ideological swing to the next. Foreign governments have noticed. Long before the BRICS energy pact emerged, major buyers were already trimming their treasury holdings. Not dramatically, just enough to avoid drawing attention. But the direction was clear, trust was thinning. And now, this new BRICS settlement system accelerates a trend that U.S. policymakers hoped no one would ever test. Here's the truth no one in Washington likes to say out loud. Trust is the real currency. When trust cracks, everything cracks. The American financial engine only works as long as the world believes the U.S. will remain stable, solvent, and predictable. But the BRICS Pact shines a flashlight on the very vulnerabilities America has tried to downplay. It gives other nations a safe way to diversify, something they were afraid to do when the dollar was the only path. The pact itself isn't the threat, it's the exposure of a weakness the world was never supposed to see. America assumed no one would test the integrity of the system. BRICS just did. This BRICS energy pact won't topple the United States tomorrow. The dollar won't evaporate next week. Markets won't implode overnight. That's not how great power shifts work. They start quietly, slowly, almost imperceptibly. What BRICS has initiated is not an immediate collapse, but a long, grinding erosion, one that chips away at the pillars of U.S. influence the same way past empires saw their dominance wane. The British pound didn't lose reserve status because of a single crisis. It lost it over decades, through a steady drip of strategic missteps, mounting debts, and the gradual realignment of global incentives. History rarely announces the turning points until long after they've passed. This moment may be one of them, but the message here is not panic. The message is awareness, because the real danger isn't the deal itself, it's ignoring what the deal reveals. Nations are diversifying not out of defiance, but out of caution. They're preparing for a world where reliance on a single financial center feels increasingly risky, and that should concern anyone who understands how power truly works. Empires don't fall by invasion. They fall by losing the world's trust, one transaction at a time. This is the start of a new chapter. What it becomes depends on whether America adapts or keeps pretending nothing has changed.